Before we start, I want you to try something simple. Don't look outward, look inward. Notice that there is something it is like to be you, right now. A private, first-person point of view. Colors, sounds, feelings, thoughts drifting in and out. And now the strange part, everything we know about the universe, every equation, every measurement, every image from a telescope, appears inside that. So here's the question we're chasing. Is consciousness just a late-blooming accident of biology on at least one planet, or is it woven into the universe at a deeper level? And that distinction matters, because one part of consciousness, what your brain can access, use, and report, looks like the kind of thing science is built to explain. But another part, the raw fact of experience, doesn't fit so neatly into the usual categories. You can describe a brain in exquisite detail, neurons firing, chemical gradients shifting, circuits exchanging signals. But where in that description is the taste of coffee, the sting of regret, the brightness of red? This gap is often captured by a famous label, the hard problem of consciousness. The Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy frames it this way: the hard problem of consciousness is the problem of explaining why any physical state is conscious rather than non-conscious. That sentence is like a trapdoor, because if it's true, if it really is hard in principle, then we have a choice. Either we find a way to show that the hard problem isn't what it seems, or we admit that something about our picture of reality is incomplete. Tonight, we'll walk through the major possibilities. We'll start with what neuroscience can tell us. Then we'll step into the more radical territory, panpsychism, cosmopsychism, information-based theories, and the persistent temptation to connect consciousness with quantum physics. But first we need to clarify what we mean by fundamental. In physics, fundamental usually means not derived from something else within the theory. Space-time, fields, laws, initial conditions. If consciousness were fundamental, it wouldn't be something the universe produces only under special conditions. It would be part of what the universe is, a basic feature of reality, like mass energy or charge. And that's exactly why this question is so dangerous. Because it threatens to rewrite the boundary between mind and world. So let's begin on familiar ground, the brain. Here's something that seems undeniable: change the brain, and experience changes. Anesthetics can erase consciousness. Injury can alter personality. Stimulation can shift perception. And certain patterns of brain activity track what we later report having experienced. So if consciousness is fundamental to the universe, it still has an intimate relationship with biology. The question is, what kind of relationship? Is the brain a generator? A filter? A receiver? A local organizer of something more basic? Contemporary philosophy emphasizes that consciousness includes both creature consciousness, whether an organism is conscious at all, and state consciousness, whether a particular mental state is conscious. It also emphasizes the difference between phenomenal consciousness, the qualitative structure of experience, and access consciousness, the functional availability of information for reasoning and report. So if a neuroscientist says, "We found the signature of consciousness," we have to ask, the signature of what exactly? Reportability, attention, memory, or the subjective feel itself? Still, neuroscience has built powerful models that try to explain how conscious access works. One of the most influential is the Global Neuronal Workspace approach. A major claim of the Global Neuronal Workspace hypothesis is that information becomes conscious when it is amplified and broadcast across a distributed network, often described as a workspace. The review article on GNW explains that, in the conscious state, a nonlinear network ignition, associated with recurrent processing, amplifies and sustains a neural representation, allowing the corresponding information to be globally accessed by local processors. The image here is almost theatrical. Many specialized systems operate backstage: vision, hearing, language, motor planning. But when something enters the workspace, it gets a kind of global spotlight. It becomes available to multiple systems at once. And that availability, this global sharing, maps onto what we call being consciously aware. The same GNW review describes ignition as the sudden, coherent, and exclusive activation of a subset of workspace neurons coding for the current conscious content. It also notes that early perceptual processing can be preserved even when a stimulus is not consciously perceived, while conscious appraisal correlates with later events, often lagging at least 200 milliseconds, such as the P300 or late positive components in event-related potentials. So GNW doesn't say consciousness is magic. It says consciousness is what happens when information wins a competition and gets promoted from local processing to global availability. And that sounds like progress. It gives researchers a story that can be tested. It suggests why consciousness feels unified, because the workspace integrates across systems. It also suggests why consciousness is limited, because only some information gets broadcast at a time. But even if GNW were perfectly correct, a deeper question remains. Does explaining global access explain why access is accompanied by experience? Or have we explained only what consciousness does, not what it is? This is one reason the hard problem persists. Even a complete account of functions, dynamics, and structure may leave open why there is something it is like when those functions are present. The IEP explicitly contrasts the easy problems, function, dynamics, structure, with the hard problem, why experience occurs at all. And that tension, between mechanism and experience, is where people start to wonder, maybe consciousness can't be reduced to function. Maybe it has to be added to our ontology, the list of what exists. But before we do that, we should ask, what are the other brain-based options? What if consciousness is not a single workspace, but a property of integrated causal structure? Or predictive processing? Or biological embodiment? We won't try to cover every theory. Instead, we'll use neuroscience as a launching point into the bigger debate. Because whether consciousness is fundamental may depend on a single pivot. Can subjective experience be derived from non-experiential parts? If yes, consciousness can be an emergent biological phenomenon. If no, we may need a different metaphysics. Let's make the question sharper. Imagine a nightmare at the heart of the idea. If tiny things have tiny experiences, how do many tiny experiences combine into the unified experience you're having right now? How do countless micro-perspectives fuse into one coherent subject? It's not enough to say, they add up. Because consciousness doesn't feel like a pile of little consciousnesses. It feels like one field, one viewpoint. So panpsychism buys its way out of one problem, how experience appears from nowhere, by taking on another, how experience becomes unified. And now we're close to the documentary's central fork. If panpsychism is right, then consciousness is, in some form, everywhere, at least as a basic feature of matter. That would make consciousness fundamental. But some people find this too atomistic. Too many little minds. So others propose a more radical inversion, not mind in the particles, but mind in the whole. That brings us to Cosmopsychism. If panpsychism asks, what if mind is everywhere in small pieces, Cosmopsychism asks, what if mind is everywhere because it's fundamentally one? Instead of building up from micro-experiences, Cosmopsychism starts with a cosmic-level consciousness, and treats individual minds as derivative, like localized perspectives carved from a larger field. A paper available through PubMed Central describes Cosmopsychism as a holistic form of panpsychism, and discusses a variant it calls priority Cosmopsychism, relying on the assumption of a cosmic level of consciousness serving as the ultimate bedrock of experiential reality. The same text describes the idea that the universe is imbued with a ubiquitous field of consciousness, UFC. Source. Cosmopsychism tries to solve the combination problem by reversing it. Instead of asking how many become one, it asks how one becomes many. How does a cosmic consciousness partition into individual subjects like you and me? And immediately, we collide with two demands. First, explanatory clarity. What does it mean, in concrete terms, for the universe to be conscious? Second, testability. How could we ever confirm or disconfirm such a claim? The same Cosmopsychism discussion positions itself as a holistic approach rather than a particle-by-particle approach, and explicitly frames its central assumption in terms of a cosmic level of consciousness as foundational. To skeptics, Cosmopsychism sounds like philosophy floating free of evidence, beautiful, maybe, but ungrounded. To supporters, it sounds like a serious attempt to take consciousness as real as anything else, and to place it where it belongs, not as a late evolutionary accident, but as part of the deep structure of reality. But there's another approach that tries to be more formal, more measurable, connect consciousness not to particles or cosmic minds, but to information and integration. If we could measure consciousness, we could do something extraordinary. We could compare levels of consciousness across sleep, anesthesia, coma, infancy, animal species, and, eventually, machines. We could stop arguing only in metaphors and start arguing with numbers. That's one reason theories of consciousness often reach for information. Because information can be quantified. Integration can be modeled. Networks can be analyzed. In the scientific literature on consciousness, integrated information theory, IIT, is repeatedly cited and developed across core papers by Giulio Tononi and collaborators. A Nature Review's neuroscience bibliography on neural correlates of consciousness references seminal IIT works such as Tononi, 2004, 2012, and Oizumi, Albantakis, and Tononi. The broad intuition behind IIT, stated carefully, is that consciousness corresponds to a system's causal unity, the extent to which the system forms an irreducible whole rather than a collection of independent parts. And this is where the fundamental question re-enters through a side door. Because if consciousness depends on certain patterns of causal integration, it might exist in many substrates, not just biological brains. And some interpretations treat consciousness as closely tied to the causal structure of reality itself. But IIT is also controversial, especially regarding how to compute its central quantities in real systems, how it maps onto our intuitions, and how to interpret its implications. So at best, IIT offers a possible bridge, a way to talk about consciousness with mathematical discipline, without immediately leaping to cosmic minds. Still, even a perfect measure would leave a philosophical question: why should integration be accompanied by experience? To some thinkers, that question pushes us toward physics, especially quantum physics. If you spend enough time around consciousness debates, you'll notice something: sooner or later, someone says, quantum. Partly because quantum mechanics is strange. It's full of probability and measurement. People hear the word observer and imagine a mind collapsing reality into place. But in physics, observation doesn't necessarily mean consciousness. It can mean any interaction that produces a stable record, any coupling that makes outcomes definite for a system. Still, there are proposals that try to put consciousness directly into the quantum story. The most famous family of proposals is associated with Penrose and Hameroff, Orch OR. The abstract for Consciousness in the Universe, a review of the Orch OR theory, states, "We proposed in the mid-1990s that consciousness depends on biologically orchestrated, coherent quantum processes in collections of microtubules within brain neurons." It adds that the review considers Orch OR, in light of criticisms and developments in quantum biology, neuroscience, physics and cosmology. Orch OR is a bold attempt to connect three domains that rarely meet cleanly: the biology of neurons, the mathematics of quantum theory, and the mystery of subjective experience. To some, it's exactly the kind of audacity we need. To others, it's an unnecessary complication, signatures of access. It fits the scientific habit of explanation. The fundamental story has a different kind of pressure, the feeling that experience can't be derived from purely structural facts, and that calling it an emergent property might just be a label for ignorance. And there's something else, too, something we rarely admit out loud. When you try to imagine a universe with no consciousness at all, it becomes difficult to say what it would even mean for that universe to be. Because all meaning, all evidence, all reasoning, happens in experience. So maybe consciousness feels fundamental because it's the condition for knowing anything. But feeling fundamental and being fundamental are not the same. So what can we say responsibly? Let's start with what we can say. First, we have strong reasons to believe that the brain is deeply involved in shaping conscious experience. Even theories that treat consciousness as fundamental still have to explain why brains matter so much, why they modulate, structure, and transform experience the way they do. Second, we have serious, testable neuroscientific frameworks for conscious access, like global broadcasting and ignition in the Global Neuronal Workspace family. These are not final answers, but they are genuine scientific proposals with empirical hooks. Third, the philosophical, hard problem remains a live issue. It is explicitly framed as the problem of explaining why any physical state is conscious rather than non-conscious, why experience exists at all, not merely how functions operate. Fourth, if the hard problem is not dissolvable, then options like Panpsychism and Cosmopsychism are not automatically absurd. They are attempts to make consciousness fit into nature without treating it as a miracle. But they carry their own heavy burdens, especially the combination problem in Panpsychism and the individuation problem in Cosmopsychism. Fifth, quantum-based proposals like orchestra or exist as serious hypotheses with ongoing debate. They explicitly tie consciousness to biological quantum processes and review criticisms across multiple domains. But they remain contentious and far from established. So, is consciousness a fundamental part of the universe? If fundamental means confirmed as basic in our best physical theories, then we are not there. If fundamental means conceptually unavoidable, because explaining it away fails, then many philosophers think the debate is still open. If fundamental means a new starting point for science, then perhaps the most honest answer is that we don't yet know what the right starting point is. But here's the final twist. Even if consciousness is not fundamental in the way mass or charge is fundamental, it might still be fundamental in another sense, fundamental to value, to meaning, to what it means for anything to matter. Because without experience, there is no pain to prevent, no beauty to perceive, no truth to care about. So perhaps the deepest reason we keep asking this question is not that we want a more exotic universe, but that we want a universe where the most intimate fact we know, experience, belongs, somehow, to reality, and isn't just an accidental flicker in the dark. We began with the simplest observation, there is something it is like to be you. And we end with the hardest question. What kind of universe contains that fact? A universe where consciousness is a late product of brains. A universe where consciousness is woven into matter. A universe where consciousness is the whole, and we are fragments of it. Or a universe where our concepts, mind, matter, fundamental, are still too crude to hold the truth. Whatever the answer is, it will reshape how we understand ourselves. Not as spectators of reality, but as a place where reality becomes aware. And until the mystery breaks, whether through neuroscience, philosophy, physics, or a new framework we haven't yet imagined, the question will remain where it has always been. Not only out there among the stars, but right here, behind the eyes.